Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay, guys, so please don't forget to turn your cameras on. Remember, today we're going to continue working on the speaking section. And on Tuesday, we started working on task number 2. Wednesday, yesterday, we practiced task number 2. And today we're going to move on to the following one, okay? Which is going to be the third task of the speaking section. So question number 3, okay? Let's see what you guys have to do for question number 3. So the second one was the university question, and now let's take a look at the third one. Okay, here we go. Okay. So question number 3, we're gonna say it's the academic question. Wheeler, you can hear? Can you hear me now? Emiliano, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And one thing, Carolina Claros told me that she couldn't make it to the class, so she will watch the video later.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for letting me know. Thank you, Emiliano. Now let's see. Okay. Well, anyways, we're gonna call this the academic question. Because task number 2 and task number 1, when you guys get there, you're going to notice that they are not academic really, right? The second one was focusing on casual things. It was an everyday conversation that you had to hear, and the vocabulary was somehow easy to understand. But starting from task number 3, then you're going to get academic content in the question. So here's what you guys will do for task number 3. The first thing, well, first of all, the structure looks pretty similar to what we did in task number 2. So you're still going to have to read something for 45 seconds. Then you will have to listen to something for 1 minute approximately. And finally, you will get the exact amount of time, the exact same amount of time that you had for task number 2, which is you'll get 30 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds or 1 minute to speak. So nothing changes as far as the format goes, nothing changes there in that sense. But what does change is the content of task number 3. Because in this case, you won't have to read a letter anymore. So it's not going to be something as casual as a letter, but instead you'll have to read a passage on an academic subject. So it will be a short text, and they will be talking about an academic thing, an academic concept. Then you won't have to listen to a conversation anymore, but instead you'll have to listen to a lecture. Emiliano, do you know what a lecture is?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Could you repeat, please?
Do you know what a lecture is?
Yeah. It's like a document from the.
Okay, a document. Right? So a lecture in this case, and for the TOEFL test, is basically going to be a class, a university class. So when I say that you will have to listen to a lecture, that means that you'll have to listen to a professor, a university professor, explaining an academic topic, an academic subject. So first you read this passage, then you listen to a lecture where you'll hear the professor explain a topic, and finally you have to answer the question. Okay, in the same time, 30 seconds to prepare and 60 to speak. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions so far? Nice. Okay. Now,
It's okay.
great, thanks, Emilia. So now we're saying these are academic subjects that you'll be reading about and listening about. So what subjects specifically are you gonna get? Now, these are the most common topics that you have in task number 3. And honestly, this is great because this allows us first to have a really good look at the structure and you already know what to expect in every topic. And second, it allows you to be more prepared in terms of vocabulary. Because since you already know what topics you can get, then you already know what vocabulary to study, and that'll help you big time in your understanding and then pronunciation and in how fluent you are when you're speaking and stuff. So these are the most common topics. As you can see on the graph, psychology, biology, and business are the ones that take up most of the topics, most of the graph, right? You have psychology, biology, and business. When you have psychology, it's about things related to our mind, obviously. So it's things related to how we interact as human beings, how our memory works, how we experience certain things, how we experience and process certain emotions, how we learn. Biology has to do with living organisms, but you will never find human biology. So forget about studying vocabulary for human biology. You never have that. Instead, they always focus on plants and animals. So it's about their organization, their lifestyles, their relationships, their evolution, adaptations is something very common. Then you get business, which is not hardcore business, but instead, like marketing strategies, techniques to attract customers, advertisement, that type of thing. And then obviously, not everything's perfect, not everything's always that accurate. There's a 10% chance that you'll get something different than that. So you could get other topics such as art, history, sociology, and so forth. So basically that's it. So my suggestion, always make sure that you have vocabulary and that you read. You need to practice reading and listening to talks, to lectures, watching YouTube videos about these topics. So for example, for biology, something that will help you a lot will be watching these National Geographic videos. Obviously the short ones, right? I'm not asking you to watch a full documentary, but if you go to National Geographic YouTube channel, then you'll find these short videos that are 4 or 5 minutes long. And that helps you a lot creating vocabulary and just practicing speaking about these topics. So you can maybe watch the video and try to summarize it. So for psychology, TED Talks are the best. So try to watch these TED Talks, the shortest ones, about psychology things. And of course, you can try to read. So maybe look for psychology articles, and that'll help you too. And for business, you can listen to podcasts. There are many, many podcasts out there that go around business strategies, business decisions, and that'll help you with vocabulary and everything else that you need here. Okay, so those will be my suggestions for each topic. Is that okay so far? Do you guys have any questions? Nope. Okay. So, okay, let's just go to an example. So remember, the first thing you're gonna do is read, and you will have how many seconds for reading?
45.
Exactly. So this is what you guys are gonna do now. I'm gonna give you 45 seconds to read this. Maybe a little bit more. I'm gonna give you 1 minute. Take a time to read it, and we'll discuss it in a bit. Okay. So, can you guys tell me what this is about?
It's about modification of the behavior based on could be experience or maybe uh, possible consequences. Like it's not having to go through that bad experience to learn.
Okay, great. So yeah, exactly. It's about the concept of behavior modification, right? We have it in the title, and then they explain what it is. Maybe they give examples, give details. So that is what we have here. Now, this is the way that it's always gonna be. You will always have a title where you will have a specific concept, the name of a concept, okay? So I really want you guys to pay attention to the title, and as soon as you read it, as soon as you see it, you have to copy it in your notes. Okay, so the first thing you guys are gonna do is write down the title on your notes. Why? Because you will have to mention it in your response. When you're answering the question, you will have to mention that title, behavior modification. And if you guys don't, then you're already starting with the wrong foot, right? Your response won't be complete. So the first thing you guys do, you see the title and you copy. Behavior modification just as it is. Don't change anything. Don't try to paraphrase it. Just like that. Now, what is the next thing that you guys need to do here when you're reading? There's only one thing that matters in this whole text. And it's usually gonna be in just one sentence. You have to find the sentence that tells you the definition for this concept. Because it's always a concept. So, which sentence would you guys say gives us the definition of what behavior modification is? Just one sentence out of the five we have here, I think, right? Or four? Yeah, five. No, four. Out of the four sentences we have, which is the one that tells you the definition?
The first one,
Okay. Yes. Could be the first one, or it could be the last one, right? So it could be the first. Behavior modification is when individuals modify their behavior based on what they have learned about the possible consequences of their actions. Or maybe the last that says, while behavior modification can be observed in experiments, it also occurs frequently in everyday settings, right? When individuals change their behavior based on what they have learned about the consequences of that behavior. So the first or the last sentences could be the definitions, right? Whichever you prefer, that's fine. So what you need to do is find that sentence and you need to take a few notes of the keywords that are gonna help you remember what the concept is, right? How it's defined. And that's it. Everything else from this text is for you to just have more context. Maybe, of course, you can, I mean, there are some other important things here, but the main idea and what you need to extract from this reading is the title and its definition, which is always going to be in one or less than one sentence. So try not to summarize it. I would say use the same words. When you're speaking, you're going to have to give that definition. And it's better not to try to paraphrase because it's just going to be like a tiny portion of your response. So it's okay if you don't show too much vocabulary there, if you don't paraphrase it or say it in your own words, because you will have time to do that. So far, I recommend that you write down the title just as it is and write down the keywords for the definition so that you can remember later what it is. Maybe the keywords here would be change behavior based consequences, right? That's it. Those are the keywords. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions about what to do when you're reading? No? Okay. So now what is next? What's the next thing we're gonna do?
listen the
Professor.
Exactly. Now you will listen to this professor giving a lecture. So in the reading, we said the most important things are the title, the key concept, and the definition. Now, in the listening, you will have a few things. Basically, the most important part from the listening, from the lecture that you need to make sure you catch is the examples that the professor gives. This professor is going to be talking about the same topic that you read. So that what you're going to hear is basically a professor going farther with the concept of behavior modification. Now, this professor is going to give you real world, real life examples of how you see this concept in action. So an application of this concept. It could be a story, it could be an experiment, it could be something from like maybe some statistics, I don't know, but you will always have real world examples of this concept, all right? Now, depending on the topic, you can have one or two examples. I'm gonna get ahead and tell you that every time that you have psychology, you will always have just one example, but it'll be long. So it'll be in the form of a story or an experiment. So you have to hear that example and you have to pay attention to it. And of course, you need to take notes because you cannot listen again. Okay, now obviously you may have something else, you may have additional details in the lecture, but that's not important. Your focus should be on what's highlighted. So knowing the title, the definition, and listening or catching the examples from the lecture. Okay, is that okay? Are you guys ready to listen to the lecture? Yeah, so get ready, take a piece of paper, and we'll be listening to this.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic in a psychology class. This happens all the time with kids in schools. Say there's a little boy or girl who's just starting school. Well, they're not really used to the rules about proper behavior for a classroom. So at the beginning they might, I don't know, interrupt the teacher, walk around the classroom when they're supposed to be sitting down. You know, just misbehaving in general. Okay, but what happens? Well, the teacher gets angry with them when they act this way. They might get punished. They have to sit at their desks when everyone else is allowed to go outside and play. And they certainly don't like that. Soon, they'll learn that this kind of behavior gets them in trouble. They'll also learn that when they raise their hand to talk to the teacher and sit quietly and pay attention during class, they're rewarded. The teacher tells them she's proud of them and maybe puts little happy face stickers on their homework. Now that their behavior gets a good reaction from the teacher, the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used to.
So that was the lecture. Okay, so as you could see, the professor was talking about the same behavior modification, but he was giving examples, right? How you see this in real life. So what example does the professor give?
Kids at school
Exactly, he talks about kids at school. So what happens with them?
when they misbehave, the teacher punish them so they learn.
Okay, when they misbehave, the teacher punishes them, so they learn, and
After that, the teachers put them a happy stickers face as a prize for their behavior change.
yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, that is great, you know, those are the details. But there's one part that you're missing, which might be the most important part, most relevant information from that.
rules.
Rules? What do you mean by rules?
That kids don't obey the rules at the beginning.
Is that the main point? Is that why the professor gives that example?
No, is the proper behavior.
Yes, but remember that that's an example of behavior modification, right? So what happens with the kids? What happens is these kids modify their behavior, right, based on experience. So they started behaving one way, they started behaving poorly in class, misbehaving, and based on experience, based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior, whether good or bad, they change their behavior, right? So they start behaving better. They have modified their behavior based on the experience they got, right? Now that is always going to be the most important parts of the examples, to see how that example connects to the idea we had from the reading. You know the definition of behavior modification, right? It's when one modifies or changes their behavior based on experience. So the most important part from that example, sorry, was how kids modify their behavior based on experience, right? And of course, the details. So what happened exactly? But don't forget that, right? So if we take a look at this is a transcript, by the way. So if we take a look at it, we can maybe highlight those important details, that important information. So as Wilder was saying, right? What happens? A kid goes to school. They are new, so they don't really understand the rules, right? They're not really used to the rules. They're new. So in the beginning, they misbehave, right? They interrupt the teacher. They walk around the classroom. They misbehave in the beginning. But what happens? What's the consequence of that misbehavior? Teacher gets angry and they get punished, right? So they are punished by the teacher. First, they misbehave and they get punished as a result. Those are the consequences of their actions. And then when they behave properly, when they behave well and they sit quietly and pay attention, what happens? They get rewarded, right? So you get the happy face sticker, or like a good reaction from the teacher. And this reaction, these consequences to your actions, basically teach you how you have to behave, right? Or teach the kids how they have to behave. So this is the most important part, the one that goes at the end. So now that the behavior gets a good reaction from the teacher, the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used, right? They modify their initial behavior. They learn. So is this okay? Do you guys get the idea of what you will have in the listening? An example or examples of the concept applied in real life. Yeah,
So basically, the lecture is an example of that definition.
exactly. It's an example of the concept, but the most important part is the definition. So you have to, when you are speaking lately, when you're gonna answer the question, you have to emphasize how the example relates to the definition. But if you think about it, it's actually an example of everything, not only the definition, right? Because I don't know if you guys remember, but aside from the definition, you have more details, right? Which we said were additional details. But let's go back. Let's see this. Let's take a look at this part from the reading. So here, the part that says additional details, they talk about when an individual learns to experience that a certain behavior results in pleasant consequences, that behavior is likely to be repeated. An unpleasant consequence discourages further repetition of the behavior, right? The professor also exemplifies this. He does, right? He says, so when the kid behaves well, they learn that this behavior gets them a pleasant consequence, a reward. Then they repeat this behavior, right? They start behaving exactly the same so that they get the same reaction. But an unpleasant consequence, so when the teacher gets angry because they were misbehaving, discourages further repetition, so they don't behave that way anymore, right? They start behaving better. So they basically, the professor in the lecture illustrates all of the ideas that are presented here, not only the definition. But the most important part in your focus when you're speaking later should be explaining how it relates to the definition. So that last part from the exam, how the kids modify their behavior, because at the end of the day, this is behavior modification. This isn't really the consequences to your actions, right? But about how you modify your behavior based on that. So is that okay? Any other question? Nope. Okay. So when you get psychology, we were saying you usually get just one example, which could be a professor's personal experience. So maybe the professor is going to tell you something about himself, something that happened to him that is related to the topic. Sometimes, like in this case, it wasn't a personal experience, right? Because he wasn't talking about himself or somebody that he knows. It was instead a broader example. So he was talking about kids in general, right? He wasn't talking about one specific kid he met. And another type of example you may get are experiments. So maybe this isn't about kids in general, but an experiment that was made to kids, right? Or to a group of kids. And when you get biology topics, business, sometimes you have two examples. For biology, it's always two, always two. So biology, usually, and I'm gonna get ahead and tell you, when the examples that you will get in biology are animals. So example one is gonna be one animal or one plant, maybe, and example two is gonna be another animal or another plant. In business, well, business, you can have one or two examples, it depends. So sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two. Is that okay? Okay, guys. Now, what do you have to do? This is the question. Gamaliel, could you please read the question? Are you there, Gamaliel? All right, maybe Emiliano?
Hi.
Sorry, could you repeat, please? I'm not listening. I think it's my internet. I hear you.
Okay.
With
I
a
was
little
saying, could you please read this
delay.
question?
Okay, yeah, sure. Using the example from the lecture, explain what behavior modification is and how it works.
Okay, thanks, Emiliano. So that is the question, and it's always going to be the same type of question. So the interesting part about this question is, are they really asking you to summarize everything? Not really, right? So they're not saying summarize the reading, then summarize the lecture, or just summarize the lecture. So that is one mistake that most students make. They just, when they start speaking, they just summarize, right? So they just summarize what they heard or what they read, which is not bad, but it's not exactly addressing the task they're asking you to complete. Because the question itself says, using the example, explain the concept and how it works, right? Using the example, explain the concept. The reason why they phrase it like that is because they want you to show that you understand the relationship between the reading and the listening. So obviously you're gonna have to summarize. You're gonna have to, first of all, tell me what behavior modification is, and then summarize the example. But it is really important that you guys show that relationship, show that you understand that relationship, that you know how those two are connected. Because if you just summarize without emphasizing on that connection, then, I mean, it won't be bad, but it won't be as good as it can be. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna give you some tips for that. So let's forget about this. Okay, so here's a template. Do you remember how many seconds you had to speak?
60. 30 to prepare, 60 to pick.
Great. So by the way, during those 30 seconds you got to prepare, it's the same as we said for task number 2. So you could, depending on what you need, you could use different strategies. You need to see which one works better. You can review your notes, you can practice speaking already, you can cross out a few things, you can maybe practice saying the introduction so that then you do it faster. You can maybe circle the most important or the most relevant information, or maybe try to draw the connection between ideas. So what part of the lecture connects to what part of the reading? It depends. Okay, so we're gonna see that more like personalized when we are in the speaking sessions. But right now, when you speak, this is the same for everyone. When you guys speak, you get 60 seconds. Do the best you can with those. So you start with 60 seconds and the clock starts counting down. First thing you guys need is an introduction. So you need to give me some context. What are you gonna do in this introduction? Basically, you're gonna tell me the topic, which is the title. It's nothing but the title, just like it is. And then you're gonna tell me what the title is, what it means. So that is the definition that you extracted from the reading. So in your introduction, again, you need to mention the title of the reading and the definition you got from it. Okay, and it has to be only one sentence. Please don't spend more than 10 seconds here. That is the best time that you can use, the ideal time. But of course, you know, we gotta be realistic. It can be up to 15 seconds, but it shouldn't be more than that. So 10 to 15 seconds. When you are starting 50 seconds or 45 seconds left, then you should have already finished your introduction and be starting with what comes next. So for example, in this case, we could say, according to the passage or to the reading passage, behavior modification occurs when individuals modify their behavior based on experience. And that's it, right? That is the topic and the definition. Any questions about that? Right? So then, as soon as you can, you have to move on and start summarizing the example. You are gonna summarize it, but again, you're gonna focus not on the details, you're not gonna focus really on the example, but on how it connects to the reading. So how do you do that? My advice, the key part I'd say, in order to have good notes, in order to have a good response, is understanding well the definition. Not only knowing where it is and what it is, but understanding it. Because if you guys understand that behavior modification, you imagine it, right? Is when somebody changes the way that they behave, the way that they act, based on what they know are the consequences of those actions, then it'll be really easy to find the important information from the lecture. You already know that, first of all, you need to look for information about what individuals these are, because these are going to be specific examples, right? So who are those individuals? You have to mention that. They are kids in the example, right? So they change their behavior. What behavior do they change? How they behave at school, right? Based on what they have learned. How have they learned? Because of the teacher, right? About the consequences of that behavior. What are the consequences of that behavior? First of all, what are the possible behaviors? Good and bad, right? They could misbehave or they could behave well. And what are the consequences of that behavior? The reaction from the teacher, right? It could be a good reaction or a negative reaction. It could be a reward or it could be a punishment. That is going to be the most important part, and your focus when you're speaking should be illustrating that. So if you understand well the definition, then it gets easier to identify what is relevant about the lecture, because you don't have that much time to explain everything. And in order to show that connection, you need to be able to do that. Is that okay so far? Basically, going back, first you need a short transition. If you want, you can go shorter than this, no problem. You know, you can, but you need a transition there. Okay, from transitioning from the reading to the lecture, you need a short transition. You could say something like this. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of, and then you just gotta start playing. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of kids. You know, this is depending on whether the professor was female or male. So if you are comfortable with their pronouns, then you can just go ahead and say the one that corresponds to the professor. And if not, just say the professor, so that you don't complicate yourself too much. So I got a message. Let's see. Emiliano. Okay. Yeah, sure, Emiliano, no worries. I'll see you next class. Okay. So you just gotta explain, what the professor explained. And if you get extra time, you can go with a conclusion as we usually do. So you could say, in summary, this is a glaring example of what behavior modification is, but that's completely optional. The most important part is for you to have what's before the intro, or the conclusion. Okay? Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions? Nope. So just to give you a sample response, I'm gonna put the timer. Okay. Okay, so let's see. It can be something like this. So according to the reading passage, behavior modification occurs when an individual modifies or changes their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of kids in school. He explains that at first, kids don't know the rules, so they may start misbehaving in class. They may interrupt the teacher, or they may walk around the classroom when they're not supposed to. So this is accordingly gonna get a bad reaction from the teacher. The teacher might get angry and punish the kids. And on the other hand, when they behave properly, when they raise their hand to talk to the teacher and they do what they're supposed to, then the teacher is probably gonna react positively. The kids may get a happy face sticker in their homework, or they may get good words from the teacher. Therefore, this is how kids learn and modify their behavior based on the consequences of their actions. Right? So something like that. It wasn't perfect. Maybe I struggled expressing some ideas or summarizing the information. But in terms of the content, I tried to summarize as much as I could the example. Maybe I made the mistake of including too many details, right? Things like examples of misbehaviors or how kids could behave properly and the reactions. Maybe I wasn't supposed to do that. I could have maybe try to avoid mentioning some details, like getting a happy face sticker or walking around the classroom. So those are details that are not that relevant to the response. I tried including them so that it was more complete, but maybe I didn't have too much time to go with the final or the closing idea, which is probably the most important one, right? Which is showing that connection. So showing how these kids modify their behavior based on the consequences or the reaction they got from the teacher. So, but that's the idea, right? Always try to focus a little bit more on how this example illustrates the concept, and you'll be fine. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions now? Okay, great. So that's it. That was an example of a psychology topic. If you don't have questions, let's do another one, probably biology or business, so that we see how it works too. Maybe, okay. What is this one? Okay. So we're gonna do the same, and this time we're gonna try to do it together. Tomorrow will be practice. So here's the reading part. Remember, you will have 45 seconds to read. So please start reading now. Okay. Let's now listen.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a marketing class.
Nowadays, something you notice more and more is television commercials that are made specifically for certain television programs. So, let's say a company wants to sell a telephone, a cell phone. Now, during TV shows that young people watch, shows with pop music or teen serials, they create a commercial that emphasizes how fun the phone is. The phone has bright colors, and they show kids having a good time with their friends. And, well, the company wants the kids watching TV at this time to want to buy this phone that's made especially for them. But the same company will make a different commercial to be shown during, say, a program about business or a business news show. Now, for this group of people, business people, the company will have to show how efficient their phone is, how it can handle all business easily, and maybe even save money. And here's the thing. It's basically the same phone. The company has just made two different commercials to appeal to different groups of people.
Okay, the question is, using the professor's examples, explain the advertising technique of target marketing. We'll have now 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So, does anyone want to try?
I can try, but I don't know how I will do it.
No
be honest.
problem. Be your first try. We're gonna practice. Go ahead and do your best.
Okay. According to the, you tell me. According to the passage, target marketing is defined as the strategy advertising to a smaller, specific groups that have been determined to have the greatest need or desire for the product being marketed. In the lecture, the speaker gives the example of cell phones that can be shown in youth programs where they show that this audience a specific mark, and also for other group of persons that they show the same phone but in a different way. In summary, this is a glaring example of target marketing.
Okay, great. So it wasn't bad at all. Actually, no, it wasn't bad. The only thing is, well, first you started a little bit later, right? So that time doesn't count.
Yeah.
But even then, you took some time, maybe too much to for the definition, right? And that can happen. Sometimes you get longer definition. So what can we do? Let's see. So target marketing, it says the strategy of advertising to small, very specific audiences that have been determined to have the greatest. So how can you summarize? Because this is everything, right? But how can you summarize?
Maybe the first sentence, the strategy of advertising to smaller, very specific audience.
Exactly. So only that. Target marketing is the strategy of advertising to small audiences. So that you can save time and maybe have a little bit more to give more details of the example, right? Although the concept was there and the examples were correctly summarized, right? You said a cell phone company that wants to advertise their cell phones. So when they advertise it to a young audience, they show one specific commercial and then do another one for a different audience, right? For business people. But maybe the details, I would love to hear the words fun and efficient, right? Which would be maybe the important details there. So for the younger audience, they will emphasize how fun the phone is in the commercial. However, for the business people, they'll emphasize how efficient the phone is, right? Maybe those words, more details that you would have had time if you had summarized a little bit more the definition. That'd be the only comment really, because everything else was really awesome. So well done, Wheeler. Okay, guys. Perhaps we have time for one more, a biology one, so that we are okay. And tomorrow we'll practice. Let's do this one here. So remember, you guys will get 45 seconds to read the article.
Now listen to part of a lecture from a biology class.
There's a large tropical insect called the peanut bug. Yes, like the peanuts that you eat. And the peanut bug's front wings are colored so that they blend in with their surroundings. But its back wings, which are usually closed and hidden, have these bright, colorful spots on them. And when the peanut bug's attacked, it suddenly opens its back wings, and out pop these big, bright colors. And that surprises the predator and gives the peanut bug a chance to get away. And then you have a butterfly called the morpho butterfly. And parts of the morpho butterfly's wings are very shiny. They reflect a lot of sunlight. When this butterfly is resting, this shiny part of its wings is hidden. Now, morpho butterflies are often attacked by birds. So when a bird approaches, the morpho flies away. And when the morpho flaps its wings, all the bird can see are flashes of light reflected from the morpho's wings. Those flashes of light make it very difficult for the bird to follow the morpho, and the morpho is usually able to get away.
Okay. Using the examples from the peanut bug and the morpho butterfly, explain the concept of revealing coloration. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So, Gamaliel, are you there? Okay. Maybe we'll learn. Now, in this case, we had two examples. The template's the same. Nothing really will change. The only thing is maybe a transition in the middle of the two so that you separate them. So you will say the same according to this passage. This is defined as that. In the lecture, the professor provides two examples. First, the first example, and in addition, the second one. Right, maybe we can even turn this. Okay. Is that okay, Wilder? Do you have any questions before you go?
No?
Okay, good. So please, you may start speaking now.
According to the passage, revealing coloration occurs when well, is defined as one defensive strategy involving the use of coloration. In the lecture, the professor provides two examples. First, he explains about the peanut bug that uses his wings with colorful spots, and when he's being preyed, he opens the wings and he has the chance to flee. In addition, also he explains about the morpho butterfly that has a shiny wings, and when he is flying away from the birds, he flashes them so they don't follow him anymore. In summary, these are glaring examples of revealing coloration.
Great. Great, perfect. So loved your response, where you summarize both examples. Maybe don't forget to emphasize, maybe at the end as a conclusion. I mean, the conclusion is fine, but you can also maybe connect it a little bit more with the topic, or maybe even mention the title in a different way, like saying, so this is how these two animals reveal part of their body, or reveal the colors from part of their body to escape predators, right? Or to defend themselves from predators. So you can connect those
Also,
things.
I could use also these are two examples of nature applying revealing coloration.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's a good idea too. Sure, it works. But yes, that can be a good phrase for biology topics. So now, what was I gonna say? No comments. Everything was great. Maybe one for grammar, and I know it's okay. And we're used to maybe using like for animals. Sometimes the correct way would be to use the pronoun it, right, for a singular animal. But we are used to using other pronouns, right? Whether the animal is female or male. So for example, to our dogs, we usually say he or she. But in this case, it'd be better to avoid making that mistake. And my advice could be, well, you have two options. You can use the pronoun it if you're gonna keep it singular, but to make it easier, you could maybe do everything in plural when you're referring to animals and plants. So here, for example, instead of talking about the peanut bag, talk about peanut bags, right? So the professor gives the example of peanut bags. They have these bright colors under their wings. So when they are being approached by the predator, they fly away and they show their wings, and this, I don't know, this like scares the predator away, and they are able to go away, right? To escape. Same thing for the morpho butterflies. You could say, second, the professor talks about morpho butterflies. That are animals that have this type of body and that allows them to do this, right? So talk about them in general with plural so that you can use the pronoun they, or if not, if you want to keep it singular, try to use the pronoun it, okay? So that'd be my advice in terms of the grammar. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions now before we go? Okay, then please don't forget to complete today's survey. and I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye bye.